So hello again. Welcome everybody. Thanks very much for joining. Those of you who have joined before, thanks very much for coming again. If it's your first time, would love to hear your feedback afterwards. There's going to be a survey that's going to pop up. Fill out the survey or just email us. We'll put out our email address also, myself and Gerry, who's my co-presenter today. So let me give you some background first before I get started. I've known Gerry Brimacombe for a long time, and Gerry had a book come out recently. And the book is titled, let me get the exact title here, SharePoint in Practice, Proven Methods to Engage Your Team and Build Your Company Portal. Available on Amazon right now. The things that I read in that book, especially regarding the end user support, end user training, and communicating with end users, engaging them, really holds true to what I talk about all the time at conferences when I present. So I wanted to bring Gerry on the VisualSP platform and talk about this together. Gerry has a presentation deck as well we'll go through, but in addition to the presentation deck, it could be very collaborative in nature. It's all up to you guys. If you have lots of questions and thoughts you want to put out there, would love to hear it. Okay, so before we get started with that, since you can see my screen, let me go ahead and explain a little bit as to how VisualSP goes into all that and how does it pertain to end user support and user training. We as a company, and I also as an individual, as a trainer myself, have been very, very focused on getting information to the user at the moment of need, when they need it. And that's what this is all about here. Um, if you go to visualsp.com, for example, and click on Try It Now, this still needs a little bit of work over here, but what happens here, it shows a mocked up SharePoint looking page in this case, and it shows a bubble that comes up over here, the walkthrough. And this is what VisualSP looks like that. All right, these walkthrough bubbles, they get information to people once again as quickly and as instantly as possible. Whatever information you want to give them, it could be learning, training, out of the box stuff, or it could be something very specific to what you're looking to do. For example, some of our customers, as you're looking at over here, HIPAA compliance or quarterly compliance certification, these kind of splash messages and all that they put up, read privacy rules, and a new tab opens up, talks about HIPAA privacy rules, etc. So this, and then VisualSP as the system is just, let me one more thing to notice to mention over here. The VisualSP as a system is a tab here that I already clicked on before, and these inline help icons. So here's an inline help example. Here's another one here, and we're still modifying and making this page better, but that's what it is right now. If you have VisualSP and you go from page to page, you go from a regular SharePoint site to a OneDrive to something else, these inline help and then the tab all appears there, and it shows you once again as a user information in context to what you're looking at. My experience has been that providing contextual information to users is much better than trying to open up their head and trying to pour all the information in there and closing it shut, hoping that they'll remember it later, because that just doesn't happen, especially for end users. So anyway, hope you find this useful information. If you do want to learn more about VisualSP, go to visualsp.com. We'll go from there. Gerry, I want to go ahead and give you a presentation, right? So you can go ahead and present.
Okay, thank
And
you.
yeah, let's do this. I'll go
Great.
ahead and look in questions as well, by the way, as I was saying before. If you have any questions, guys, ask that and we'll talk about that in the presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Asif. So that's in the chat section of the GoToMeeting panel there, where question and answers are. And absolutely, please pipe up with any questions or comments. There'll be some specific places in the presentation to address those. So here we are, engagement first, then get married to SharePoint. We always like to put a lot of puns in our course names, don't we, Asif? So how to get people to use your SharePoint internet, otherwise why bother? So these are some proven techniques, tools, and templates. So there's some ways that we have successfully achieved this, getting people to use your SharePoint internet. And so we're going to explain some of that stuff today, Asif and I together, as well as there's a couple of templates that I'll share with you. All right. So just let's get to the nub of why are we here? So we want to discuss these proven methods, as mentioned, that we've used these in real projects, and their ways to connect to your users and get them excited about Office 365 and SharePoint. We want to explore with you, with the audience here, is the user engagement important to the success of a SharePoint project? And I always talk about the Field of Dreams. You remember that movie, Kevin Costner? Yeah, so build it and they will come, which is, I can see Asif shaking his head there, because yeah, it's not usually a good method. Build it, they will come. So ultimately, the objective of this 1-hour webinar is to help you get your people to use your SharePoint intranet or your portal so your implementation is successful. It's not successful unless people are actually using it. So let's get started right here with a little bit of in the chat. Can you just quickly let us know what's your experience with SharePoint user adoption or user engagement? Is there successes or quote unquote learning opportunities that you could enter in for us there? And let us know.
Yeah, I think the comments are coming into the questions panel,
Oh,
which
the
is perfectly fine.
questions
Either one
panel.
is
Okay.
fine.
Okay. So let's use the questions panel. Okay, I see handout links aren't working. So there's a good one right there. So people aren't going to be very engaged if the system doesn't work, right? Okay, so I'm not getting a very good view of this questions panelist.
I can
So,
see.
okay,
Yeah, yeah.
all right. Anything you want to address there or you want to raise? Or should we keep
Uh,
moving?
let's see. Kip mentioned, for example, poor historical use, negative connotations, difficult to get folks to jump in.
Okay.
Um, Chris Kerr mentioned trying to get education, communication out to 20,000 colleagues. Like
Great.
that's difficult always, I understand.
Yes.
Yeah, difficult to get senior leadership to use it. I talk about this all the time as well, that if you don't have the executive sponsorship, it's not going to work. So Ignacio, that's a very good point that you bring up. Yep.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about all of those things
Yeah, let's do it.
in this presentation. Okay. Yes, boss. Let's go. Okay. All right, so this is me. You've already got me, so you don't really need a picture, but yeah, I get passionate, I get excited about using SharePoint out of the box, and really it's about the users and helping organizations to be more effective. If your users aren't using your SharePoint sites, then your project isn't successful, and you can't gain the benefit of the amazing tools that Office 365 and SharePoint provide. And as Asif mentioned, I have recently published a book on the topic. The user engagement, project management are just chapters in the book. It really is an end-to-end how to build your company portal. So it is available on Amazon. Asif, you want to talk to this slide?
I've been in this community for a very long time, and honestly, not gonna go too deep into it because I could go for minutes talking about it. But I started out as a developer, then a trainer, and then I did a lot of work with developer, administrator, power user folks over all the years. But I'll tell you, the hardest that I found is the end user community, because that's where you have to speak to their emotions and exactly what's in it for them. They're not usually motivated; they just want to get their job done. And that's exactly what we'll be talking about in this session. So pretty excited to talk about it.
Great. Yeah. Okay, well, let's get started then. So let's talk about the basics of user engagement. I always like to define our terms up front. So what is user engagement? So here's a quote from my book, self-referential though it might be, but it is the process by which we get the portal users. So I use the word portal and intranet interchangeably here. Get the portal users and potential users involved and interested. So getting them involved and interested in the portal, in the project. When I looked at Webster's dictionary, they described engaged as greatly interested, and there's a synonym committed. There's a few others, but these are the ones that I seem to make most sense to us. And think about the opposite of engaged then is alienated or bored or wearied. So do you want people to be bored or wearied by your internet solution or your portal, or do you want them to be greatly interested and committed? That's a rhetorical question. No need to type the response into the Q&A. Yes, we want them committed and engaged. So imagine rolling out a new system where the users are greatly interested and committed to the project. And I've been part of these, and boy, it's a good feeling. And if they are interested and committed, they'll be more open to change, recognizing that oftentimes when we are rolling out a new portal or an intranet, which is the main focus of our discussion today, is the the big bang, the big rollout. Those systems are in fact touching every part of your organization, usually, right? So change management is something to be aware of, isn't it? How do we manage the change? So interested, committed, get them more open to change. They'll be willing to accept the new system and even accept my stumbles or mistakes. If I, oops, something didn't work right on the first day. Well, they're open, they're committed, they're engaged. They're more likely to let that slide rather than going, oh, there we go. Yeah, sure enough, it's not a good system. They'll also work harder to learn. So those 20,000 colleagues that somebody mentioned a moment ago, yeah, it's really hard to get those people on board and engaged. And learning is a key part of it. We'll talk about training as part of this presentation as a key part of your user engagement plan. And here's an interesting point. I want you to think about this kind of culture of engagement or non-engagement. So everybody talks to each other around the water cooler or chatting on Teams or whatever. The idea that one person's opinion will spread to others is an important thing to keep in mind. So you want to start shifting the culture and create a culture of engagement.
Throw
Asif,
something
did you
in
want to
there
add?
actually.
Yes, please.
You mentioned something in your slide that actually one of our attendees, Teresa, talked about that my organization is married to SharePoint, committed financially, but not fully engaged. Love that. And then also, Teresa actually had a question later as well, saying, is it an acceptable practice to set the intranet as one of the homepage tab in everyone's computer? Can you do this in group policy for IE and or other browsers? I can go ahead and take that if you like.
Go ahead. Yep.
Very ironically, last week, SharePoint Fest Chicago, I was one of the speakers there, and one of the keynotes, a good friend of mine, Sue Handley, she was talking about the exact same thing, that you could get 100% adoption simply by setting the homepage of the user's computers to your homepage of your intranet. But don't do that. That's just forcibly, falsifying information, saying, oh yeah, we have 100% adoption, everybody goes there every day, because you're forcing them to. That's not a good idea, in my opinion, Teresa. That's just my opinion. So yeah, she mentioned the same thing that I talk about all the time, that it's not a great idea. However, if there is some really relevant information that people do get a lot out of, and you just want that to be the homepage and organically they love it anyway, not forcibly, then I think it's okay. But just tread cautiously, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't 100% agree with that respectfully, Asif, is that there are times when setting that your homepage through group policy is a good idea. Usually if IT is already setting some group policy pages and shortcuts and stuff. But it makes it a bit easier for people to get to the new system. But don't call that user engagement. That's just a mechanical process.
That's the thing. You cannot use analytics to say, well, we have 100% adoption just because we did that.
Yeah.
And Teresa, by the way, mentioned that, well, not the homepage, but one of the tabs, I guess, that opens up.
I see.
Definitely, yeah, do it cautiously. Not a bad idea.
Okay, so let's give a little quick overview. I'm going to keep it moving along. We've got a fair bit to cover. So some things that work, I'm going to put communication first here. Communication is key, it's critical. People need to know what you're up to early on and frequently. I was on a motorcycle trip to Alaska, and one of the riders with us was a user change management consultant and trainer, and we were sitting in this remote pub in a mining town on the BC-Alaska border, and he said that quite interestingly, what they found is that when you do have a big system rollout, approximately 10% of the users are going to be enthusiastic about the new change. And about 10% of them will be opposed no matter what you do, with their arms crossed and saying, who moved my cheese? And the remaining approximately 80% can be influenced, okay? So just think about that for a moment. What do we do with this? First of all, it's a nice example of the 80-20 rule popping up once again. But what do we do with that information? This is the part that interested me. He said, so focus on the 80%. The 10% that are enthusiastic, they're already in your corner. The other 10%, their arms are still crossed at the end of the day. So your user engagement energy can be focused on the 80% that need that influence. So think about that, especially when you're talking about your 20,000 colleagues. Now they're only down to 16,000. What a deal. So here's an interesting one. I'm a real fan of practice what you preach, or however you want to say that, but keep excited about the new system and fully engaged yourself. And if you have a core team working with you, you really need to make sure that that engagement and excitement and that positive attitude about the rollout is really creates a culture within your project team and spreads throughout the organization. That might be a little bit idealistic, but it's certainly a good starting place. Here's somebody talked about getting senior leadership. I have a full chapter, not a full chapter, a section in a chapter about forming a steering committee. And the steering committee is a tool that I always use when I'm rolling out a new intranet portal. And this is a collection of senior executives from across the organization, as broad-based as you can and as senior as you can. So you might have a VP of finance and a director of HR and IT director, et cetera, in the group. And these are a really important conduit for spreading information and therefore engagement, communicating with the steering committee. Usually we get together once a month, and I'll talk in a moment about the status report. The steering committee receives a status report on a regular basis about what we're up to, what we're running into, any concerns that we have, as well as that good old budget and timeline stuff. People need to know what's happening, right? I usually do a project plan. Well, I said usually there. I always do a project plan. I've got a strong project management background. Sometimes it's a really simple project plan. Sometimes it's just one page double-sided with who's doing what by when. And but that helps people be engaged, helps people be committed and get behind your project because they know what's going on. This status report, one of my hobbies is I play hand drums. So this bass drum of accountability, we promise and deliver regular status reports. I've got on my website, there's a free status report template if you want it at lightlever.ca. I've refined it over the years. It works great. And it's a simple way to both keep me on track about, am I doing what I said the project plan was going to do, and let everybody else know where we're at, if any issues we've been running into. So I strongly recommend a status report as a project management tool, but also as an engagement and communication tool. I'm just going to keep moving. Asif, if you want to interrupt,
Yeah, no.
anything, please do.
If there's any comments here and there, I'll go ahead and point that out. For example, Ignacio agreed with you that 10% that you're talking about before are your champions.
Yes.
I'll throw in there as well that the other 10% you talked about, Sarah Hasse, who's another presenter who talks about user adoption a lot, she calls them the naysayers that you should ignore.
Mm-hmm.
Just focus on the other 80%. Completely agree.
Right, yes. Yeah, great, thank you. So some of this work continues, some more high level things to talk about user engagement. When I'm building an intranet, I start with a purpose statement, and we develop this with the team about what is this thing going to do. And sometimes it's a very sort of a motherhood type statement. Sometimes it's more specific. Like one I had, they said that the intranet is going to help us align everybody's work with the strategic plan to serve our customers better. This type of thing. Really an important piece to start with, and you'll see later as we look at the communication plan that this purpose statement comes back over and over again about why are we building this or why aren't we building that? Well, does it align with the purpose statement? So really take the time to think about what's this thing going to do for me, and the me being, as Asif mentioned earlier, the WIIFM, everybody's favorite radio station. What's in it for me? So you really have to think about that all the time, don't you? And one way to help people get tuned into WIIFM is involving them. So in the methods I use, we involve the users right from project planning through design, development, testing, pilot, training. Everywhere along the way, I involve the users as much as I can. People tend to embrace what they help to create. So really, this is bold because it's a key point of this entire presentation. Involve the people as much as you can. They're helping create. Even that mentioned a moment ago about status reports and project plans. Those engage people so that they feel they're part of the team. Now they're helping create your intranet. There's a big difference between here's this thing we built for you and here's this thing we built together. It feels different.
Absolutely.
So take the time to listen to people's concerns and ideas. I've had a variety of people I've got to work with, and sometimes I'm sitting there going, these are really wacky ideas. But when I listen to the ideas with respect, I tend to learn something, and those people feel heard. When people feel heard, they feel more engaged. They feel they are helping create. You may not use those ideas, but take the time to listen to them. Ultimately fostering good relationships. So this is throughout the organization, the steering committee that I mentioned earlier, the design team, the testing, migration team, all of these folks, you want to develop good relationships. It's ultimately all human, right? We're talking about user engagement. Those users are people, we're people too, except Asif, he's a machine.
You talk about listening, by the way, that goes way beyond just the corporate world. This will make all of your relationships better if we all listened, acknowledged, and then put
Yeah,
our view out there.
yeah, I think my wife was saying something like that the other day. Okay. So, and also this high level, some methods that work, training, very important. So more on this shortly. Wow, ... Okay, so I put a few slides in here just to make sure we didn't lose out on the opportunity to chat. Are there any questions coming in that we can talk to at this time?
I think continue going. There's just some comments, but no questions.
Okay, great. For sure, we'll keep those questions coming in the questions panel, and we'll address them. So yeah, so here's a question. What did I say was the most important thing about user engagement? I can't remember now. I can. So communication. Communication is what we're saying here. Did anybody get it? Do we give them candy or something?
No.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So how do you get people to embrace what you're creating? So I said earlier that people embrace what they help create.
Yep.
So get into the co-creation mode with everything you do. And I've seen where people say, oh, well, we don't have time for that. The thing is, it's a false economy. If you're not really engaging as many users as possible, including that steering committee and the rest of the organization, as much as as practical, as much as possible, then you're missing out on an opportunity, and you may well fail in the project by saving time.
Ignacio, by the way, won that one. He did say help them create it.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Good. See, like all humans, I like to know that I'm being heard, so I
What did you
appreciate
say?
if.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I see where you're going now. Okay, so let's talk about communication a little bit here. So the importance of communication. How do you like my high-tech picture there? You know, the old tin can with a string attached to it. So I said earlier, people embrace what they help create. So when we communicate with people, they feel they are involved and that they're helping create these solutions. And I don't just mean pay lip service. Remember that I said earlier about really listening with respect and making sure that you give people the time. We really do not like to be kept in the dark. So many times I've gone into an internet development project, and the previous project has failed, or they can't stand the internet, or the portal is a nightmare, and I can't tell you how many times it's because IT is just, or the communication department has just thrown it over the fence, and here you go, this is your new system. People are very alienated by that approach. Do not like to be kept in the dark. They want to know what's going on. They want to know what's happening. When's it going to be rolled out? How will it solve my business problems? Who do I talk to get help? All these kind of things. And there's a much longer list, of course, but the how it will solve my business problems, that reflects back to something I said earlier when we talk about the intranet purpose statement. So one of your early analysis pieces is finding out what problems you're actually solving. And unfortunately, and I'm guilty of this myself sometimes, we get excited about the technology, but really the technology is truly just a means to solve business problems or create opportunities in the organization. So don't just get wrapped up in, oh no, it's this cool shiny new thing, or it's going to be performed faster or whatever. It's what are the actual problems? How's it going to make everybody's life better? Asif, do you have something to add?
Yeah, you're definitely preaching to the choir over here. Well, at least uh, many of these exact same statements have been said either by myself or by other fellow speakers just last week when we were at SharePoint Fest presenting, that it's very much of a people game. We
Mm-hmm.
can't treat people like technology. We can't just say, like you've been saying already, you can build it
Yeah.
beautiful, wonderful, and it's going to work. That doesn't happen. I
No.
mean, look at Craigslist, for example. Craigslist has never looked good, still doesn't look good, but a ridiculous amount of engagement.
Yes.
It's about the people. What's in it for them?
Mm-hmm. Well done. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. So yes, the good communication that you're putting out there is going to connect your people. We're talking about engagement, right? It's going to make them confident and bought into and engaged and paying attention. Good communication, clean communication. On the other hand, poor or a lack of communication distances and alienates them. And you know that if you've created distance between your users or alienated them somehow, it's really hard to get that back. So really take the time to build that communication into your plans and everything you do. And I've touched on this already, but I just want to make sure that we remember we have 2 ears and 1 mouth on average. I remember I was doing a job interview, and there was a young man, and we asked one of the job interview questions was, tell us about your communication skills. And he spent about 5 minutes talking about his vocabulary and his ability to form good sentences and his convincing manner and sentence structure. And after about 5 minutes, we had to interrupt him and say, how about your listening skills? And he completely forgot that listening was a communication piece. He didn't get the job, by the way. I think he went on to politics. So yeah, and it's a fundamental human need that we want to be heard. There's a deep need to feel heard, and that's heard deeply as much as possible. So whenever you're doing communication, it's not, you know, even some of the communications, even the template that I'm going to share with you later, it's an email. Some of it's an email, but think about ways that you can use that email to trigger some response. One thing I don't talk about in the presentation, but it's touched upon in the template, is a suggestion box. So usually when I roll out an intranet, we build a simple suggestion box where people can comment or ask questions, that sort of thing, in a way that's non-urgent way to get more information. And the importance of responding to that suggestion box, right? Again, the two-way street thing. Am I making sense?
Absolutely.
Great. I see something about small business comment there. I can't wait to get into it. So yeah, so if they're not being heard, they get upset and alienated, the opposite of engaged. So this is where I'm saying create the time and the structure in your plans to listen to people's ideas and concerns. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a lot of time, but I'm thinking of a specific example where I just held this really great design session. We had an hour and a half, very interactive, hearing people's ideas and their problems, their issues, and showing them different ways we could solve it and coming to consensus, and finish the meeting, and high fives all around. This thing's really working. And the director of HR, who was in the meeting, came to me afterwards and had a whole other set of requirements that she had not raised during the meeting, and it almost created a little bit of a change request, because it was like, well, hang on a second, we didn't talk about that in the design meeting. You're talking about the different design features you want. But as it turned out, it was just a person that didn't feel comfortable speaking up in a meeting, and 90% of what she raised actually was addressed by the time we finished the project. It was just she needed to voice it one-on-one, make sure it was heard. And I took the time in the hallway to listen to her for 15 minutes and say, okay, I got it, made some notes, walked away, and ended up being a very successful project in the end, including HR being very pleased with their results.
Here's a question from Teresa. I'll read it out to you. What
Yes.
therapies, techniques do other IT types use to avoid becoming jaded and frustrated that others are not jumping in to engage users?
What techniques are
Or
the
therapies?
therapies? Wait, say that again, please.
Yeah, what techniques basically do other IT types use to avoid becoming jaded and frustrated that
Mhm.
others are not jumping in to engage users? That's what she wrote.
Okay. Yes. So I'd be interested, she's directing that question to the group here, so I'd be interested to hear how people respond. I can respond. Asif, did you want to take that?
Uh, I can definitely take that. And if you have some thoughts or answers to any of these things that we read out, please feel free to respond as well.
Mm-hmm.
But one main thing I try to tell IT a lot, and I don't get listened to sometimes, unfortunately, I feel, is do not give too much information or too much change directives at one time.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely a thing called change fatigue that people go through. And
Yeah.
also information fatigue is just too much these days. Context is much more important than content. Give
Yeah.
them only what they need at the moment of need. Don't try to be, I can answer all the questions. Let me make them all these resources. They don't think like you. You're IT, they're end users, very different. Empathize. Empathy is
Mm-hmm.
very important. That's my thought.
Yeah. And I think part of Teresa's question was asking about, okay, here I am. I seem to be on my own trying to push the system through. What about the other people around me, if I understood it correctly? And it's all an engagement process, isn't it? No, so Teresa, if you're expecting that the communication department is going to help with the engagement, you have to engage them more deeply. I've got a method that I'll talk about in a moment called the content stewards, which might be useful for you, actually, regardless of what phase you are in your rollout.
There was an answer from Kip, by the way, one of our other attendees, saying, "Take a
Oh,
deep breath, then think about another tack or direction to take."
yes. Don't give up, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to say again about listen with respect and genuine interest. And this can be a benefit in itself. You get some human connection. It can be really feel good about the project results when you really heard the people and feel that you've delivered to their need. Okay, so here I want to talk a little bit about the senior leadership, et cetera. So yeah, it's hard to engage everyone, especially for large organizations. So look for the nodes. Where are the clusters of people? So maybe that might be a user group, or it might be maybe there's an executive leadership team meeting that you can get on the agenda for. Maybe there is a regular webinar that's held to discuss what's new in the organization. Get creative, back to what Kip said, take a deep breath, find another way to get in there. There's a lot of persistence, back to that drumbeat of communication. Sometimes you just need to keep persisting with a positive attitude. Start at the top because stuff runs downhill. So yes, the idea of a steering committee is a very useful idea where you can, if you can fully engage this small group of people and they happen to be department heads or VPs or managers, that they can take away those messages and share with their managers, their people, et cetera. You can get a trickle down throughout the organization and start creating a bit of that shift in culture where people are more interested, engaged, and committed to what you're doing from the top down. And so sometimes you can create groups of allies. Actually, the steering committee falls under this as well because it's something I'm saying you create. Oh, I'll mention as well, so I use the steering committee sort of from a project management point of view, but if you're already, your intranet is already launched, you already got your SharePoint in place, et cetera, you might want to call it a governance committee, okay? So you can create a committee that is sneakily about engaging and making sure communication is happening through the organization, and maybe it's a governance team or governance committee. Very similar structure to the steering committee, but more of a production-based and ongoing thing. But so groups of allies. So as I said, I try to find ways to co-create an intranet. There's usually a design team or design committee. So a broad-based group of people, someone from finance, someone, and this is not necessarily the managers, that's more steering level, right, or governance oversight. I'm talking about as close as possible to the people that are using the system every day, as close as possible to the people that are reporting the business challenges, like, oh, I can never find contact information, or when a client's sitting in front of me, it takes me 5 minutes to find the forms that I need to fill out with them. Those kind of business problems, those are the people you want to sit with in your design team, because they're going to go, well, hang on a second, if we build that, what about this? Or here's another idea, or can we create a list that stores vendor contact information to save time when we go to contact vendors, whatever. So so that design committee is across the organization, as representative as you can, and as close to the working folks as you can get. Usually a dozen or so people, facilitated sessions, and you're co-creating, co-designing with a group of individuals. And they become allies, right? The development team is the same thing. Usually the design committee or design team kind of just evolves into the development team. In my case, I do a lot of the development myself, and then I'll involve people in the organization. If there's somebody that's got some SharePoint skills, then we find ways to use them and utilize them. And then we present frequently to the design or the development team to say, this is where we're at, this is what we've accomplished so far, how's this looking? So it's kind of a, what's the term, a iterative approach to development. Yeah. Or there's another popular term that I'm forgetting right now. Agile, thank you, that's exactly it, yeah. And the migration team's worth mentioning here. In my experience, when we are building a new intranet or upgrading an old one, migration is the biggest, most complex part of the project every time, and by a factor of 10. So again, usually we involve the users. The migration team is, so the people that are helping with decide what from the, let's say, the communications department, what do we need to migrate to the new system and where does it go? That's the communications department people that know that stuff best. So we get them engaged, we build some tools, enable them to use tools, and we train them how to do the migrations so that they can be hands-on, they get used to where things are going, how they're stored, and how to use SharePoint in the process. And hopefully they become allies. Sometimes the migration team kind of ends up hating you at the end, but it's because it's a nasty job. So I'm going to mention this content stewards model. It's something that I've used on quite a few projects, and it's been mostly successful. Not every time, but mostly. So the content steward, so here the word steward means someone that takes care of, right? So this might be your SharePoint stewards or your Office 365 stewards. We had one, they call them data stewards. It didn't quite resonate as well. But this is a group of allies and helpers that you can create either as you roll out. So when I'm rolling out a new project, it's usually the design team or the migration team that kind of morphs into this content steward group. Because they're the ones that already know the systems, you've already got a relationship with them, they understand the portal through the process of co-creating it, right? So generally, content stewards, you'll have a representative, one of the lines here says that you place them in physical locations where they're going to support their peers. So you might have one content steward per department or division or per building or location. And it's not their main job. They just happen to be someone that's interested and capable in SharePoint, and they get publicized as being, if for everyone in the finance department, talk to Bob, he's your content steward, and Bob happens to know how to support people. And this is where you find this, and this is how this works. And they also provide a channel of communication. So they might say, they might come back to you as the project manager or the governance committee or steering committee and saying, boy, the HR department is just not happy with how the system's working, or here's a new idea that they've had, or here's a challenge that keeps coming up. And without that content steward person in place, you may never have heard about that. It might be one of those things that's just not worth emailing the director about. So that channel of communication, remember the two-way channel, content stewards do a really nice job of that. So yeah, they're generally on site. So I can say, hey, Bob, this SharePoint thing, how do you do that document download piece or that metadata tag you were talking about? I don't quite get it. So you recruit this team, and I do mean recruited because you'll have to talk to their managers and say that it's going to be taking 10% of their time or that sort of thing. But their attitude, enthusiasm. You don't want the people that are like, I know, it's such a piece of crap, isn't it? I'll tell you. No, you actually want the people that are going, yeah, this is pretty cool. No, it's, just hang on, let's take a look at it again, because I think you'll see that once you understand this, this will help your job, it will help you make your job easier. And they should have an interest and aptitude in SharePoint. It may be a bit crass, but oftentimes I've found that the content stewards are pretty excited about boosting their resumes because they've got, SharePoint support on their resume. So why not? I think it's a great tool. So this group gets an extra training and support. You'll see that in the communication plan that I'll show in a moment. And then you can call them whatever you want. There's a number of models out there, and this is not completely unique to me. I've borrowed it from other teachers and such. But maybe they're divisional reps or super users or SharePoint champions or whatever. Okay, so I do have a communication plan template that I want to walk you through. So here it is. So this is the one, well, here it's not. Let me bring it actually onto the screen that's being shared, shall I? So
That would be helpful, yeah.
Yeah, I try to be, yes. This is the template that's available in the handouts, as is the PowerPoint. So feel free to download this and use it as you wish. Go ahead and remove my logo and the copyright information at the bottom. I'm not worried about it. Just go ahead and run with it if it's useful to you. So executive summary, what's this document for? There's the internet purpose statement up front and center. Remember I said this forms a foundational keystone to all of your communication. Okay, so that is lifted from our design document. Then we've got a communication schedule here. And if we've got communication professionals in the group, please don't cringe too much about the simplicity of what I'm doing here. I'm always looking for a simple way to do things, not necessarily the right way, but what can keep it simple so people can understand it and they can get engaged in it. So really, this is the most basic way I could write a communication schedule. What's being communicated, who's doing it, when, and any details. And if it was details was anything more than a couple of bullets, they're detailed below. So communicating about the communication plan. Here's the all staff webinar or the go live webinar, which we'll talk about. Here it is. So the communicating about it, then running it, coincident with go live, which we'll talk about in training. There's content steward training, making sure that these folks have the training they need before the launch. Yeah, there's a few more things here. I'm conscious of time, so I'm just gonna zip down a little bit and point out that in here, there's a training section that might be useful to you. And then here, communication draft. So here's where I use this stuff every time I roll out. I take this template and I tweak it. With Asif's comment earlier, I think these are probably wordier than they should be. The context versus content message that Asif made earlier. So probably you want to tighten them up a little bit. This is a template that I developed a couple of years ago now. But there is some great stuff in here for you to take and adapt to your own needs, I hope.
Yeah. And folks, those of you who are wondering, there's going to be an email that's going to come to you later in a few days, hopefully a couple of days, and it's going to have the recording, PowerPoint, and this template. So you'll get all that stuff just in case you're not able to grab it from here.
Thank you, Asif. Okay, anything that we want to raise?
I know
Peter,
we're a
about
bit
communication?
behind over here, yeah,
Yeah.
in the timing. So
Okay.
there was one thing that actually, I think is going to work better later. We're talking about training next.
Yes, we
So
are.
one of our attendees, Marty, is talking about how training applies to small businesses and all. And I'll come
Mhm.
back to that.
Okay. Yeah, most of my clients are small businesses, Marty, so I can
Hmm.
speak to that. So why do we train? Well, because we want to show people how to use the new internet, of course. And also recognizing people fear what they don't understand. If you can help people understand these things, they're going to be less afraid and more willing to be engaged, committed, and paying attention. It also gives us time to opportunity to spend time with the users. And it's more on that. But you got a half day sitting with their content stewards. You're building relationships, and you are listening to them, finding ways to improve the system or understanding any concerns. I hesitate to put this next bullet in as a sales pitch, but it's probably a better way to say that. But I really believe that when I'm doing a training, it's really important for me to convey my enthusiasm, positivity about the new system, and call that a sales pitch or call it just trying to get people excited and engaged. I think it's important to have that right attitude.
Yeah, another person actually in our attendee group, Mary, had mentioned that earlier, that you definitely want to be excited yourself about all these things because excitement, enthusiasm is all contagious. I completely agree,
Mhm.
Mary.
Yes, thank you, Mary. Yes, absolutely. Um, Yeah, there we go. It's an opportunity to convey your excitement and enthusiasm. Every training session is that opportunity. And again, it's a two-way street. So not just a monologue, a talking head, which feels a bit odd for me in this webinar format. Um, and it does give people an opportunity to voice their concerns and their ideas out loud directly to someone who's listening. Listen as much as you speak, like we talked about communication. And be engaged. So as Mary said, be engaged to get engagement. The more you listen carefully and are excited about the system, the more you're going to get other people. That contagion is a good word, enthusiasm. Ask lots of questions and listen to the answers. Isn't that a good idea? Oh, sorry, nobody's answering. So, and just be open. There's good ideas could arise anytime, including your go live seminar where you're teaching people how to use the portal, and they might go, well, what about this? And anyway, whether they're good ideas or not, make sure people feel heard and respected. This slide is very high level. It doesn't give us a lot, but I'll just go through quickly. I really think it's important. Any communication we do, and training is the key communication, always think about your audience. And so training is, what is the level of experience? How patient are they? Speed of uptake, what preferences do they have? I rolled out one internet recently, and they had a much more senior, average age was 55 or so. And those people wanted classroom training as opposed to the one I did before, where it had a much, and not to over generalize, but this much younger group just wanted videos. So they have preferences. So see if you can find that information out before you design your training plan. So I'm going to skip over this because I want to get to the training plan. The classroom versus webinar. Actually, the timing piece, Asif mentioned that earlier about the just-in-time type training. You're trying to get that training as close as possible to when they need it. Oh, wow, that's exactly what that bullet says. Okay. Okay. Yeah, and so there's trade-offs between webinar, classroom, video. There's cost, there's timing, there's organization. I'm showing 10 minutes left, and I want to show you this training plan. When videos were 60,000 words per second, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and video's 60 frames per second. So do the
Good
math.
calculation. I agree.
Yeah, yeah. And then ultimately, you're probably going to use multiple methods. So back to that question earlier about when people get jaded, yeah, find a different way. And it might be some video, some e-learning, some webinar, some VisualSP, some classroom. Okay, so here's a sample training plan. So I just included in the PowerPoint. It's just lifted directly out of my book. So executive overview. This is really important. If you can manage it, get the executives on board early. Brief, face-to-face overview presentation. This is what we're up to. You want to tell them about the benefits, general and specific. You want to give them some basic understanding of what this portal is and what SharePoint is, so that they can speak intelligently to their colleagues and to their direct reports. So you're empowering that executive to be on your side and to be engaged and supportive of your project and the ultimate portal that comes out. So this might be an executive leadership retreat or a board meeting, that sort of thing, where you can get in front of people and be brief, to the point, and really, really organized. Support videos. These are basic videos that I do with most of my rollouts. I do a lot of small business intranets where there's not big budget involved. So I do simple screen captures where it might be, you know, okay, here's your new internet homepage, and you click here, you can search, and you click over here, you see the contact list. This is how you use it. You know, 5 to 10 minutes, just a screen capture with voiceover. Very simple. And that's of course posted to Microsoft Stream or to a document library and available on the portal. So it's on-demand training, not as nice as the VisualSP stuff, but probably fits in there, right, Asif?
Absolutely.
Content stewards training. So I talked about them earlier. I'm not going to go through that one, but it's more about using it. Site administrator. So if you're handing the site over for someone else to administer, recognize that they're going to need some knowledge transfer, especially understanding governance and permissions and any customizations that you've done. Quick reference guide. So Asif pointed an example of one of those out. This is some clients want to have just something can stick on their cubicle wall to refer to key things like the metadata or where to get help. It's very basic, usually one page. Portal overview for all staff. So this is a key kind of milestone about going live. So usually it's a all staff webinar, usually 1 hour, a little bit of Q&A in there. So plan 30 to 45 minutes of presentation and open it up to Q&A so you can get people's feedback. Yes, have the courage to ask for their opinion. And then that is always recorded for later on-demand viewing, just like we're recording this session. All right, so we've got about 7 minutes left. Are we okay, Asif?
Yeah, we're doing good. Let me go ahead and throw this question out there because I don't want a question that was put out a long time ago to get missed. So Marty is from a small company saying, I'll read it quickly, it's a long one. Applying this to a small business is a different challenge. A business owner may be filling half of the roles of the corporation while growing the company. This means I have to be able to show a return on each component as the time and money is invested. So no 6-month period to roll out something large. Small bites that bring a quick return is necessary. How do you prioritize SharePoint components along with other related Office 365 components to bring effective time management and efficiency returns quickly? That's a mouthful.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to say again, it's collaboratively. So I work with a lot of small businesses, and I know the one-man army kind of approach where these CEOs or presidents or owner-operators are trying to do it all themselves. I include a huge training component in everything I do and really try and create it collaboratively. So the question about which tools do you bring out first and how do you organize those, I usually start with a demonstration of other sites that I've built, and I have permissions from a number of other clients where I can show, okay, here you go, Joe, small business owner, this is some of the things that we've built in the past that might be relevant to what you need, and show them SharePoint, show them Teams, show them how Stream fits in, etc. So educate, and then co-create. I don't know if that's a very brief response to that. Asif, do you want to add to that?
Office 365 has a lot of components. In our own company, for example, and it's a small company also, we did not put out everything on day one. It was just, I think as a trainer myself, it was a bad idea. Even though it was not that many people to control, to govern, still it's not a good idea to put everything out. So we decided, all right, we needed team task management. Let's put in Planner. We needed some recording calls and stuff with customers and prospects. Let's put up Stream. And it was one app at a time, and then also getting specific awareness training for them, for the whole team, and then also putting inline help items and help tab, because that's what we do as a company. So we put our own stuff out there as well to make sure that when people had questions when about Stream, let's say, or about Planner or whatever else, they had the help available to them. But try not to open up everything, because that's usually a disaster from what I've seen, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah, it's got to be. I really love it when we're able to roll things out in a on-demand approach. So you have to educate people so they know what to ask for. But boy, if you can, the difference between saying, here's this great new thing we think is going to be awesome, compared to them going, hey, I have this business problem I want to solve. Are any Office 365 tools that can help that? And you could say, oh yeah, as a matter of fact, there's Stream that might help you with that. So now they're asking for it. So it takes time, right? It takes a lot of time and patience, which we don't always have. So it's imperfect, isn't it? We do our best, and it doesn't always work out perfectly.
I agree.
Okay, so let's just wrap up here. First of all, communication is really, really important. It's the keystone to everything we do here with user engagement. And involving users. So communication is a way to involve users, and people embrace what they help create. So take the time to involve users. Sit down with them, take them out for lunch, form a steering committee, form a design team, form a user group, whatever you can do to get people involved. And of course, training is mentioned as a critical opportunity to engage and empower and be a two-way street for communication, but people fear what they don't understand. So make sure that you have a good training plan in place right from the executive on down to all the end users. And ultimately, as Mary said, be engaged to engage others. All right, so I think that is it.
Yeah, any other questions and stuff, guys, go ahead and put it out there. I'll read some of the other comments and questions that are there.
Okay.
Put some commentary on that as well. So one, Teresa mentioned, training comment. I provide a SharePoint 101, providing general info for only 1 hour, then offer to do further tailored sessions for end users' needs. Completely agree. In fact, I've done the same thing, and I call them not training sessions, but more awareness sessions, getting people just aware of what it is, how it relates to you, where do you go for help, and that's it. Hour to 4 hours max, and that's it.
Yeah.
So that's a very good comment. Thank you, Teresa. Then also, Teresa had a question. Technical. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Can I add to that? Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and I think it's probably the way you're doing it already, Teresa. But just offering that, let me know if you need more training. Is most people don't. So, of course, you do need to follow up with them and say, how's it going? Are you ready for that training now? Do you want it? Here's something scheduled, whatever. So, encouraging them to take advantage of that additional training is sometimes necessary.
Absolutely. Another, we only got about a minute left. Wow, time went by really fast, by the way. A question that Teresa put out there, technical question based on our experiences. How do you communicate the importance of using Microsoft browsers such as IE when users plan to edit files from document libraries? Chrome has weaseled its way in some users' default browser and doesn't provide the transparent experience. Managers get frustrated, stop using SharePoint, and so do their staff. I actually like Chrome quite a bit, so it's.
So do I. I'm actually using Chrome most of the time now with the IE tab extension. If you're aware of that, it's kind of handy.
I'm not actually.
Oh yeah, it's just IE tab, and it makes Chrome act like Internet Explorer in those few times when you need it with the Open Explorer. Yeah, it works really well. So yeah, it's again, it's education. I don't recommend using Internet Explorer anymore for SharePoint. I used to always, and now people are getting away from it. So it's educating them and then collaborating on what the best solution is. These are the pros and cons. How do we decide what the standard is in our organization?
And by the way, just so everybody knows, in about a month, there's going to be a release for the new Edge browser. The new Edge browser is very much based on the Chromium platform, so the Chrome browser, basically. And once that goes out, I'm really hopeful that that's just going to take over the world, because this is an awesome, awesome browser. I've tested it out and it's wonderful. It brings both best of the both worlds from Google and Microsoft and puts it together.
Oh,
So
good.
looking forward to it.
Yeah, because it's been embarrassing when, oh, look at this great new browser, and it doesn't work with a bunch of key
Yeah, the
features in
current
SharePoint.
Edge, yeah, unfortunately, no. And IE, of course, has been done for a while,
Yeah,
but the new Edge is going to be pretty awesome for sure.
cool. All right.
Yeah, it's time.
Yes.
We will put this recording, make it available on the website. In fact, if you go to visualsp.com and you click on Learning Hub and then Webinars, you'll see all the prior webinars, and this webinar will go there as well. And as I mentioned, that one of our team members will go ahead and send out an email with the recording of this one, PowerPoint, and the training, the communication plan as well. Any last words from you, Gerry?
Just thank you all for your kind listening. I really appreciate everybody being here and the excellent questions. And thank you to Asif and VisualSP.
Wonderful webinar. Thanks so much, Gerry, for doing this. And yes, thank you very much, everybody. Hope to see you next time. Happy holidays. Take care.
Happy holidays.